In this video, I want to outline and explore possibly the most mysterious piece of the Dark Ether saga so far, Eddie Richtofen's secret operation, Project Janus. Across Black Ops Cold War, every mention of Project Janus brought up more questions than answers, and with no mention of it in Vanguard, as that story was 40 years in the past, I believe many players have forgotten about it entirely by the time that Modern Warfare 3 Zombies has released. Given a recent reference in Season 1, it is likely that Janus will be a crucial plot point going forward, and so this video will cover everything we know along with some speculation about what it could all mean. Our first introduction to Project Janus was in a cipher in Season 3 of Black Ops Cold War. This already marks it as important as all of Cold War's ciphers were dedicated to information relating to multiple maps in the future, for example the Ural Mountains Outbreak Zone and Operation Boulder, from Mauer-Zertoten being mentioned in D-Machine ciphers, where normal intel may just be about the current or next map. The Janus cipher in question is a coded message from Dr. Oscar Strauss to Dr. Elizabeth Gray, warning her that much of her research will be put on hold, as well as large amounts of both of their collected Ethereum being diverted elsewhere. He asks her, "What do you know of Project Janus?" and tells her to be very careful who she mentions this to. Obviously in this intel, Strauss is annoyed that both he and Dr. Gray's research is being actively harmed by orders from the director, but more than that, he is clearly concerned about whatever this new project is. As is mentioned in Modern Warfare Zombies, Strauss was genuinely a genius when it comes to Ethereum, and so if he was worried, something very dangerous was happening behind the scenes. After reading the J cipher, many players then looked back to a piece of intel we had been given in the previous season that seemed innocent at the time and realized that it was connected to Janus, where Strauss writes to Gray celebrating the fact that the science departments in Requiem have now been given more funding than the military departments. With this intel being so soon before the J cipher, we can begin to understand why Strauss was so concerned. Within the space of possibly even as short as a few weeks from having his budget increased significantly, he had half of his Ethereum taken away from the research he wanted his team to be working on, meaning something else was being developed using his money and resources, but without his involvement. Again, as Strauss is exceptionally intelligent, he could only have assumed that this was a direct order from the director, and therefore that this Project Janus was a project the director had a personal interest in, even possibly more of an interest than Requiem itself. Shortly before the events of Mauer-Zertoten, CIA operatives working at a listening station beneath the Berlin Wall accidentally intercepted a dead drop containing information on Project Janus and tried to contact the headquarters about it. From this we can gather that some of the parties involved in the project were from outside Requiem and had to get the information into Requiem, likely to the director himself, through secret means. Not long after doing this, the agents who accidentally intercepted the message were sent a package from the Department of Requiem, Gray's robot, Klaus. Interestingly, we also learn that the robot was stolen from Dr. Gray, and she had no knowledge of who took it or where it had gone. Weaver immediately sent this note back to Gray, telling her to burn the note and delete it from Requiem's mainframe, as the director has taken the robot for use in Berlin and they cannot discuss any more about it. The CIA agents, after opening the Klaus package, begin to be murdered one by one by him, with only Agent Rico remaining. To make matters worse, the Berlin outbreak caused by Valentina begins at this point. Given Rico's note is found next to a corpse with Klaus's hands around his neck, it is likely that Klaus strangled Rico to death to prevent the last known person with information on Project Janus from saying anything else about it. During the main quest, when Klaus begins hacking, the player can unlock the J cipher number 2, which when decrypted reveals that Klaus was indeed sent by the director in order to prevent the leaks about Project Janus. In fact, the Berlin outbreak wasn't even a concern for Klaus. In Mauer-Zertoten's ending cutscene, we see Eddie Richtofen typing to an unknown group, saying that Project Janus can now proceed as the threat in Berlin, which is Valentina's German army, and also likely the leaks from the CIA agents, has been resolved. Additionally, however, Maxis must be dealt with as her powers are growing. Tying this all together is a piece of intel called Memorandum for the Board. While this document is found in Forsaken, it is dated as February 8th, 1985, 6 days after the events of Mauer-Zertoten. In it, Eddie writes to the board of directors of an unknown corporation. While in the document the sender is redacted, the intel description says a memorandum from Requiem's director discussing the events of Berlin and his involvement, meaning Treyarch see it as vital that we know this is from Eddie. The document reads, February 8th, 1985, memorandum for redacted board of directors from redacted subject Berlin event. Since Berlin, many of you have approached me about my involvement. I will make my intentions clear on the matter. Then we will move on and and be done with this. Berlin presented an opportunity to acquire a pertinent piece of our puzzle. Instead of capitalizing on it, I chose to deploy countermeasures to ensure that the gateway would be closed. The choice seems to have perturbed more than a few of you. Initially, my plan was to utilize the American forces on site, but their incompetence shone brighter than the sun. A communication from an Omega contact revealed they would be deploying Requiem strike team in Berlin. Given their success rates up until this point, I knew the operation would be in the most capable of hands. I laid a trail of breadcrumbs and they eagerly followed, none the wiser to their role in my plan. As you all know, and to my vexation, have repeatedly mentioned this week, we had the prize goose being offered to us on a silver platter. Yet I chose to send the dish back to the kitchen. While I shouldn't need to explain myself for the sake of discouraging further irritating lines of inquiry, I will put this simply, it was not the right time. If we are to achieve our goal, we must do so at the proper time and place, when all the appropriate arrangements have been made. We were not ready to proceed when Berlin happened. We will not rush this. A single misstep here could be catastrophic for our work, not to mention life on Earth itself. And if that's not scary enough, you should also know it would be disastrous for your pockets and the shareholders, because of course, that's all they care about, money, not the world going into despair. Perhaps those are stakes you can sink your teeth into. Project Janus will proceed when the time is right, and worry not, Maxis will be dealt with. In fact, she is quite important for what comes next. I've decided to read this intel out to you rather than paraphrase as I've done so far, as this is the single most important piece to the entire puzzle, and gives us more information on Project Janus than anything else. Those key pieces of information are: 1. Janus needs a stable gateway to the Dark Ether, such as the one Valentina had opened in the Berlin end station. 2. Eddie could have used Valentina's gateway, but didn't believe it was the right time. The board of directors of this company severely disagreed on his actions here, and the majority of the document is his justification for going against their wishes. 3. Eddie manipulated all of the events in Richtofen using Klaus and his personal contact in Omega, who is or was Dr. Peck, in order to ensure that the strike team could close the portal, meaning he was certain this opportunity of having a gateway, for whatever reason, was not right for Janus. Most likely because Samantha was not dealt with at the time and many other events were not set in motion. 4. Eddie tells the board of directors that he shouldn't have to explain himself, but does it anyway to save further annoyance. This means he has high standing in this company, and is possibly even on the board of directors himself. 5. Eddie says that all the conditions must be right and Janus must not be rushed. He says if there was a single mistake, all life on Earth could be destroyed, and says that if that's not scary enough, you should also know it will be disastrous for your pockets and shareholders, meaning the board of directors are exceptionally rich people, possibly the most rich and powerful people in the world. This gives some insight into just how powerful Eddie is socially during the time of Cold War, and seems to mirror the original Ether story where Richtofen was working with the Illuminati. 6. Samantha Maxis is essential for what happens next. From the point in time this document is written, this refers to the Forsaken and possibly even beyond. Given how she is used to capture the Forsaken, it is likely at least one of these uses was in order to capture and seal Zykov's primordial Ethereum, the most powerful form of Ethereum for the director to use in Project Janus. In addition to this, we get one more Janus-related piece of intel in Cold War. This informs us of a colossal project going on in West Virginia, just as world governments deployed a false cover story for the outbreak of Richtofen, saying there was a gas leak in East Berlin. Residents of a West Virginia city or town have been informed that the nuclear plant has a dangerous radiation leak and they must all relocate. Furthermore, there are colossal tunnels being bored underground, a giant wall being constructed around the area, 5,000 tons of steel being brought in, and many scientists and military personnel being brought on as staff for the site. This seems to be the location for one of the launch maps for COD 2024 Zombies, set in the 90s, Black Ops Gulf War or whatever it's called, judging from leaks and rumours and the fact that it coincides with the information we have received from this intel. Interestingly, this document is listed as coming from the secretary in the executive office. Well, this could be a typo and mean the executive's office, referring to the CEO of the mysterious corporation. The only real body of note commonly called the executive office is the executive office of the President of the United States. If this is true, it would mean that not only does Eddie have a direct line to the President's office, but they are willing to do much of his work for him. Given what was discussed with the previous piece of intel, this seems possible. If that's the case, then the entire US government could also be involved in Project Janus alongside the mysterious corporation. The phrasing, Secretary Executive Office, is only found on the Cerberus report for the director, and the wiretap he personally requested on Weaver and Carver's phone calls, both relying on actions that go above and beyond Requiem and the law, which are actions that possibly only the Executive Office would be able to sanction. This brings us to Modern Warfare Zombies, where in the Season 1/Act 4 cutscene we see Dr. character Ava Jansen have a severe hallucination. After she snaps out of it, we can clearly view what she was looking at on her computer screen, which is the status of all of the Requiem heads, Ravenov and Samantha Maxis. The Requiem heads are obviously all deceased underneath the hotel room in Urzikstan. Attached to that some sort of Ethereum device that might have harnessed their souls. Whether they were trapped or whether they did this willingly is currently unknown. We'll have to wait for COD 2024 Zombies. And despite Ava's hallucinations, Ravenov is still alive as of present. Whether that's a foreshadowing into the future, we will have to wait and see. But the most important status, however, is Samantha's. After Forsaken, many had assumed Samantha died in order to defeat the Forsaken. Instead, however, her status is listed as classified Janus Directive 6776D. Clearly, something happened to Sam that is above and beyond the clearance of Operation Deadbolt, and possibly the rest of the CIA. This is strange though, as the status of the other Requiem heads is totally fine to view, again leading us to the idea that Janus is so colossally secretive that it is even more secretive than information about Requiem, which at the time was thought to be the most secret agency in the US. The most important part of this, however, is the 6776D. Many people assume this to be a random code, but given the rest of the people here have their status displayed, we know this represents Sam's current status. Now, many people pointed this out in my prior videos that this might be referring to the amount of days that Samantha Maxis was in the Dark Ether, and given the gap between the end of Cold War Zombies 1985 when she was trapped in the Dark Ether and when Modern Warfare 3 Zombies is set in 2021, this would be earlier than that because it would be in the early 2000s. So I thought maybe Samantha had actually secretly already escaped from the Dark Ether in the early 2000s and we were just not privy to it and we just didn't know about it, and it happened before Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, and that could be something that's revealed later on. However, I feel like I've misinterpreted that, and if we assume D means days, then we can say her status has been classified for 6776 days. Her status is not dead or missing, but classified for 6776 days. Modern Warfare Zombies takes place in 2021, so 6776 days prior to this is sometime in 2003. Given Cold War Zombies occurs over the course of multiple years, it is not out of the question to assume that Black Ops Gulf War, or whatever Treyarch's next game may be called, also has an in-universe multi-year story. So, we know from Forsaken's ending cutscene that the next chapter of the story begins in 1990. There's a 5-year time jump. So, that would indicate that Project Janus' next phase begins at the end of Cold War 1985, carries through Gulf War Zombies' story 1990 onwards, and concludes in 2003. Helping this possibility is the newly leaked information that Treyarch's next game will also receive an immediate sequel, like Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3, and so it is possible that this game could continue the zombie story up to 2003. This brings us to one of the elephants in the room that I have mentioned in some of my previous videos, Terminus Island. To summarize what I've recently stated in those videos, Jack Fletcher, the leader of Terminus Outcomes, was originally a New Zealand Special Forces operator given to the CIA to handle security on Terminus Island. This seems to be one of the other launch maps for COD 2024 Zombies, after the West Virginia town. After this concluded, he was honorably discharged but ended up becoming a mercenary as he knew nothing about being a soldier. If we assume that Terminus Island is the location that Peck is traveling to in 1990, and the place where Weaver and co are being held captive and known as Black Site 13, it means Fletcher would have extensive knowledge on Ethereum and gives him a clear motive for accepting Zakhaev's contract. To make the connection even more obvious, Fletcher has literally named his PMC after Terminus Island. With that in mind, if we think about Terminus Island in connection to Janus, however, it is possible to argue that this could have been one of the central locations for Eddie's operations alongside West Virginia, especially if it's where he chose to hold his most dangerous prisoners. Combining that with the fact that we know Fletcher was specifically chosen for security team here, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he is aware of the goals of Project Janus, perhaps even involved. If he was, could he perhaps be the modern arm of Project Janus? This could explain why he seemingly tricked Zakhaev into giving him Ethereum and then got him out of the equation. He continually overcharged Zakhaev and offered to allow the debt to be paid off in Ethereum if he was gathering resources for Project Janus to continue or carrying it out by stopping Zakhaev. These actions would make sense. Contain as much of the Ethereum as possible to prevent further outbreak and increase the Ethereum reserves of Project Janus as well. After all, if the island in the next game is Terminus Island and the group Fletcher runs is called Terminus Outcomes, then the name is likely even a reference to this. The last option I want to discuss is Project Janus and its relation to Samuel. For a while, ever since Cold War, the community have speculated that Project Janus is some sort of experiment to save Eddie's son Samuel, who seemingly may have accidentally died in a house fire when Weaver tried to assassinate Eddie as a target for the CIA prior to the events of Cold War Zombies. As to why he was a target, we don't know. Did he know he was even Eddie? He probably didn't even know who Eddie was or anything to do with that, and he has no idea he was or is the director now. But that assassination attempt seemingly failed, and that is why Richtofen has a scar in his eye and throat, but then maybe somehow Samuel ended up trapped in the Dark Ether. And maybe part of Eddie's plan is to rescue his son from the Dark Ether, as potentially he might be an ethereal orb. Maybe that's what happens to your body after you die, who knows. Anyways, while I suspect that at least some aspect of Janus is to save Samuel, as it makes for great motivation for Eddie and makes him a much more interesting character, I think the evidence we see in Modern Warfare Zombies points to much more. Whether Project Janus ended on the date under Samantha's portrait in 2003, or if it is still ongoing today, either way these have gone on far too long to be simply saving Samuel, especially if that takes place in the 90s. This, to me, clearly shows that Project Janus is something far more encompassing than the community is currently speculating. Whatever it is goes far too long. What do you guys think? Is there anything Janus related that I missed going over this video in Modern Warfare or Cold War that changes my conclusions? Or do you agree with me? And what does Project Janus really mean? And how does this relate to Samantha Maxis? If she is still trapped in the Dark Ether, what does that mean? Does that factor into Project Janus? Who knows? Let me know what you think in the comments. For a quick summary of the timeline events, Season 2, Requiem funding is allocated more to Grace/Strauss's department's understanding of the Dark Ether and Ethereum, July 6th to 7th, 1984. Season 3, the J-Cipher drops half of all Ethereum extracted diverted to the project, late 1984, either just prior to or right after Outbreak's main quest number 1. Season 4, CIA agents accidentally intercept a Project Janus info dead drop. Note, the Janus info was being sent to Requiem from an outside source. Hint at Eddie's people. Klaus is sent to protect info from getting out and tie up loose ends. The dead drop is intercepted on January 8th, 1985. Klaus arrives January 27th, starts killing during the same night. Mauerderton happens February 2nd, 1985. Writing a group memo, the director states that Janus may now proceed unimpeded. Maxis presents a problem that must be dealt with. Season 6, the memorandum for the board intel drops, states Mauerderton breach presented a key piece of needed for Project Janus, presumably either the gateway itself or the Forsaken, but the time wasn't right. February 8th, 1985, we have the Season 6 progress report, test site for potentially Project Janus in West Virginia, June 1st, 1985. We then have the Forsaken map take place, June 4th, 1985, the Forsaken is acquired, all breaches collapse, Maxis is no longer a problem for Project Janus. As to whether she has some sort of future relevance, we'll have to wait and see. We then get Modern Warfare Zombies Act 4 cutscene, which shows a picture of Samantha Maxis, captioned Classified Janus Directive 6776D. What we know about Project Janus requires vast amounts of Ethereum and primordial Ethereum probably, requires a stable gateway to the Dark Ether, requires the Forsaken potentially for additional energy. We know he's trapped now in the containment chamber, but he seemingly might be the announcer voice in Modern Warfare 3 Zombies, so is he somehow still in control? Does he escape from there? Does that factor into Janus? We don't know. Maxis presented a threat, she was dealt with. Is she still a threat? Is she potentially going to somehow work together on Janus and has some sort of future role? We're not sure, but seemingly Janus was still active as of 2021 or as of 6776 days ago, 2003. We don't know which is which. Did Janus end then, or is that the date that Samantha escaped from the Dark Ether? What does that date mean and how does it factor in? But that's everything I wanted to say in this video. Let me know, like I said, your theories in the comments below. Anyways, make sure to subscribe if you're not here for latest and greatest Call of Duty news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching and bye.